Man saves elephant with abscess in leg. What happens next makes the whole world heartbroken. The massive bull elephant's front leg dragged behind him with each labored step, leaving uneven furrows in the cracked mud of what had once been a flowing river. Dr. James Mwangi spotted the irregular gait from nearly a kilometer away, the distinctive three-legged hobble immediately signaling distress in an animal that should have moved with the fluid grace of 6 tons perfectly balanced. Through his binoculars, the veterinarian could see that the elephant's left front leg had swollen to nearly twice its normal size. The skin stretched tight and discolored around what appeared to be a massive infection. The bull stood alone in the center of the dried riverbed, isolated from any herd, a clear indication of serious illness in a species that rarely abandons its own. His enormous head hung lower than normal, tusks scraping the ground with each painful movement as he searched for moisture in the parched earth. The infection had clearly been progressing for weeks, transforming this magnificent creature from a symbol of raw power into a study of quiet suffering that touched something deep in James's chest. As the veterinarian approached on foot, leaving his vehicle at a safe distance, the elephant's behavior revealed the extent of his distress. Every few steps the bull would pause and lift his injured leg slightly, holding it suspended for long moments as if trying to escape the constant pain. His trunk moved restlessly, sometimes reaching toward the swollen limb but stopping short, instinct warning him away from touching the source of his agony. The usual alertness that characterized wild elephants had been replaced by a dull endurance, his amber eyes reflecting exhaustion rather than the wariness typical of his kind. James had encountered similar cases before: abscesses that developed from thorns, injuries or infections that festered in the harsh African heat. Left untreated, such conditions became death sentences, slowly poisoning the animal's system while rendering them unable to keep pace with their families. This bull's isolation spoke of a herd that had been forced to move on, following ancient migration routes that could not accommodate a member who could no longer walk the vast distances required for survival. The elephant noticed James's approach, but showed no inclination to flee, another troubling sign that suggested his condition had progressed beyond the point where flight remained possible. Instead, he remained motionless, his massive frame swaying slightly as he struggled to distribute his weight across 3 functional legs. His breathing was labored, each exhale creating small clouds in the cool morning air that spoke of a body working far beyond its normal capacity, simply to maintain basic function. The veterinarian established his position 50 meters away, close enough to conduct a preliminary assessment while maintaining the respectful distance that wild animals required. Through his field glasses, James could see the telltale signs of systemic infection: the dulled coat, the slightly sunken eyes, and the way the elephant's ears hung motionless rather than maintaining their constant motion. The abscess itself appeared to have reached critical size, creating a bulge that disrupted the natural line of the elephant's leg and clearly caused excruciating pain with each attempted step. "Easy there, old man," James whispered, more to steady his own nerves than to communicate with the suffering giant. The morning sun climbed higher, casting harsh shadows across the empty riverbed where one of nature's most magnificent creatures faced a crisis that would require all of human compassion and veterinary skill to resolve. The tranquilizer dart found its mark in the elephant's hindquarter, delivering enough sedative to dull the pain while allowing him to remain standing, a critical consideration for an animal whose massive weight could crush his own organs if he fell. James waited 20 minutes for the medication to take effect, watching as the bull's rigid posture gradually relaxed into something closer to natural ease. The elephant's eyes remained alert but calm, tracking the veterinarian's movements with curious attention rather than the defensive wariness that had marked their earlier encounters. James approached with the methodical patience that 15 years of wildlife medicine had taught him, his surgical kit organized on a portable table, positioned within the elephant's line of sight. Transparency in his movements seemed to provide comfort to the massive patient, who watched each preparation with the focused attention of an intelligent creature trying to understand unfamiliar but non-threatening behavior. The abscess had reached the size of a basketball, its surface tight and discolored, radiating heat that spoke of the raging infection beneath. The incision released a torrent of infected fluid that had been building pressure for weeks, immediately providing relief that was visible in the elephant's body language. His massive head lowered slightly, trunk swaying in what seemed almost like a sigh of relief as the source of constant agony finally found release. James worked steadily to flush the wound cavity with antiseptic solution, removing debris and diseased tissue while the elephant stood with remarkable stillness, as if understanding that this temporary discomfort served a greater purpose. The daily treatment routine became a ritual of gradual trust building. Each morning, James would arrive to find the elephant waiting in the same spot where they had first worked together, no longer attempting to move away when he heard the approaching vehicle. The bull had learned to recognize the sound of James's footsteps and would lift his injured leg slightly when the veterinarian approached with fresh bandages and medications, a gesture that spoke of cooperation rather than mere resignation. By the third day, the elephant began showing signs of genuine recovery. The swelling in his leg had decreased noticeably, and his appetite returned with encouraging vigor, evidenced by the systematic way he stripped bark from nearby acacia trees during the hours between treatments. His movements, while still careful, carried less of the rigid caution that had marked his earlier condition, and his trunk had begun its normal exploratory behavior, occasionally reaching toward James with gentle curiosity. The breakthrough in their relationship came during the 5th day of treatment when the elephant, unprompted, extended his trunk to gently touch James's shoulder as he worked. The gesture lasted only seconds but carried a weight of communication that transcended species boundaries. Acknowledgement, perhaps even gratitude, expressed through the most sensitive part of the elephant's anatomy. James felt the brief contact like an electric current, a moment of connection that redefined his understanding of the emotional complexity possible between human and wild animal. "You're going to be just fine, aren't you?" James murmured, his voice carrying the quiet satisfaction of a medical puzzle nearing resolution. The elephant's response was subtle but unmistakable, a thigh, soft rumbling deep in his chest that carried none of the distress calls he had made during those first desperate days. As evening approached and James prepared to leave, the bull remained standing near the treatment site, no longer isolated by pain, but choosing proximity to the human who had become associated with relief and healing in his remarkable mind. The change came without warning on the 8th day, when James arrived to find the elephant lying on his side rather than standing in their usual meeting place. The wound itself appeared to be healing well, but something deeper had shifted during the night, a systemic collapse that spoke of infection spreading beyond the reach of antibiotics and good intentions. The bull's breathing had become shallow and labored, his massive frame rising and falling with the irregular rhythm of a body struggling against forces that medical science could no longer control. James knelt beside his patient and conducted the examination that confirmed his worst fears. The elephant's temperature had spiked dangerously high, and his pulse carried the rapid, weak quality that indicated organ failure. Blood tests revealed what the veterinarian had hoped never to see. The infection had entered the bloodstream and spread throughout the animal system, creating a septic condition that was beyond treatment in the wild. All their progress, all the trust they had built, could not overcome the biological reality that some infections simply went too deep to cure. The elephant's eyes, though dulled by illness, still tracked James's movements with the same attention that had marked their daily interactions. There was no accusation in his gaze, no sense of betrayal despite the failure of human medicine to save him. Only the calm acceptance that characterized his species' approach to mortality. His trunk moved restlessly across the ground, occasionally reaching toward James with the same gentle curiosity that had defined their relationship, though now each movement required tremendous effort. As the afternoon sun began its descent toward the western horizon, the bull made a decision that defied every expectation James held about wild animal behavior. Using reserves of strength that should not have existed in his failing body, the elephant struggled to his feet and began moving slowly toward where James sat organizing his unused medical supplies. Each step was labored, each breath visible in the cooling air, yet his purpose remained unmistakable. The elephant approached to within arm's length and slowly, carefully, lowered his massive head until it rested against James's chest. The veterinarian remained perfectly still, feeling the warmth and weight of this magnificent creature's final gesture of connection. There was no desperation in the contact, no plea for impossible salvation, but rather something that felt remarkably like gratitude expressed through the ancient language of touch that predates all words. Thank you too, my friend, James whispered, his hand gently touching the coarse hair behind the elephant's ear. They remained in that position as the sun painted the sky in shades of gold and crimson, man and elephant sharing a moment that transcended the boundaries between species. The bull's breathing gradually slowed and deepened, becoming more peaceful with each passing minute until it simply stopped, as natural and quiet as the end of a long day. Even in death, his massive head remained pressed against James's chest, a final gift of trust that would echo in the veterinarian's memory for the rest of his life. The evening wind moved through the acacia trees with a sound like gentle applause, carrying with it the profound silence that follows when something irreplaceable passes from the world forever.